Welcome back for my second video, where we're kind of getting the gameplay of Asteroids straightened out here. And where we left off, we have UI elements, and we can get score points. But if we hit an asteroid, we never respawn. So we're going to fix that in this video. We're going to implement a respawning system, and then also decrease your lives, and then eventually when that runs out, it will say game over across the screen. You can push R to retry, and then we will have kind of one of the cornerstones of a game like this, the limited number of lives gameplay. And then after all that, if you want to see something a little bit kind of cool, it's a little bit complex, we're going to add invulnerability for the player so that the player won't spawn on top of an asteroid. But then also the player will have like above the player a little icon to indicate that the player is invulnerable. And so that's pretty cool. So let's begin. Let's get some destruction of the player working. So our journey is going to begin, I think, with the player. What we need to do is essentially work with this variable here called needs respawn. What we're going to need to do is essentially activate that when we hit an asteroid so that the game controller knows to respawn the player. So let's go over to Object Player and into the Collision with an Asteroid event. So right after we destroy the player, we want to set global.needs_respawn to true so that the game engine, well, I guess the game manager in this case, knows to respawn, to begin the code to respawn the player, which means checking the lives, making sure that it's not game over, stuff like that. So we're going to jump over to the game manager. And inside of the game manager, we want to add another step. This is going to be a begin step event. And this step is for us determining if the player is needing to be respawned. So we're going to add begin step. So the description here is check for respawn of player. And that will be if global.needRespawn equals true. So if the player needs to respawn, we're going to activate this code. And then we need to check the lives. So if the player doesn't have any lives left, or well, I guess let's do the case if the player does have lives. So if global.lives is greater than 0, so the player has lives left. So in this case, we will take away a life. So we will do global.lives --. Then we will actually respawn the player with the standard create command, var player equals instance_create_layer. And we're going to create the player in the dead center of the screen. So that would be room_width divided by 2, comma room_height divided by 2. We create them on the layer, and we're creating obj player. And I think before all this, let's turn off the flag that needs respawn needs to be processed. So turn off the flag that a respawn needs processed. So essentially, if there are lives left, we will take away a life when we will respawn the player. And then we're going to add the else case here. This is if the player has no lives left. And so we're going to do our game over code here. Just putting some comments here to make sure it's easy to follow in the future when we may add in detection of the wave being defeated. So we'll come back to this. Let's verify that we can actually respawn the player and see how that works. So when we hit play, Let's go crash into an asteroid. So it doesn't matter which type, a small asteroid will do us in when we respawn. If I hit a big asteroid, we also die. Then one more, and then we've stopped respawning. Notice it doesn't crash, our lives are empty, our bar is gone, no highlights, nothing. So we have been defeated, and now what we should probably do, there's two things that we still need to do. We need to protect the player from getting basically spawn camped by an asteroid. See if I can get one that's going to head right towards the player. So right there, you can see that all of my lives got instantly spent because the player spawned right on top of an asteroid and just died instantly. So we need to protect against that. So let's do the game over text first, because while we're here thinking about game over, let's handle that. We're going to need another font for this. So let's create a new font. We'll call this FNT underscore game, because this is some game info font. And well, let's pick a good font for game over. I think that Comic Sans is a pretty solid game over font, so we're going to pick that and go with 48 and make it bold so it stands out and reminds the player. So we can close that. Now let's go over to the game manager, and we need to essentially start handling the rendering of this text. So that's going to require us to make another global variable called global.game_over, and I'm going to set that to false. So that's going to essentially tell the game and any actor that needs to check this that the game is over. So if there are no lives left, then global.gameover equals true. So we're setting the state that something is going to need to react to this, essentially. We can, if we want, while we're thinking about it, we can restrict our ability to restart the game to only if it is game over. That way you can't accidentally reset your game. You can only restart if the game over state has been set. And that might be something you would want to consider. Then let's jump over to Draw GUI. And so in Draw GUI, this is probably where we want to handle it, towards the bottom at least. That's getting kind of a lengthy bit of code here. So what we're going to do, let's add some more lines so I can scroll up. We're going to have game over text. This is in the center. So kind of the standard, well, we're going to have the standard thing, but we also need our if global.gameover is true. So if we've reached the game over state, then we're going to activate this code. And well, we might as well take some of this other stuff because we're going to use a lot of it. Indent the text. So the font that I want to use instead of text UI is game. Instead of yellow, I want red. Instead of a right alignment, I actually want center alignment. And I do want to play around with the vertical alignment. So we want V align, and that'll be FA_middle. The default is top alignment, so it appears kind of on the top. So we want this to also appear in the center of the screen. So our draw text is going to say room_width divided by 2, room_height divided by 2, comma, game over. And we could add another text line and have it say press R to restart or press enter to restart. We could change our restart key to enter if we wanted to. We could get a little bit fancier than that. Then also, so if you recall, I mentioned that like if you change an H align or a V align, it's going to change everything. So we're going to have to reset it back to VA top, but we can watch what happens here. So when I run out of lives, what's going to happen is that text is going to appear, but keep your eye on the score or the lives or even this. You should see it jump. So let's go run out of lives real quick. And if you saw this jumped up because the alignment changed, you can really see it up here on the weapon selectors, that it's back to normal, but the moment we call that game over, it jumps them. So one of the easiest ways is just instead of going and adding code everywhere, we can reset back to normal vertical alignment. And the default for that is top. So FA underscore top. That way we don't have to go through and every time we use it, we set it back to top. So this, if we are gonna vertically align this text, then if we just set it back to top, all the other text will be fine too. And that's actually one of the other kind of standard practices. If you're doing an alignment other than left for horizontal or top for vertical, you only set it and then you reset it back to normal after you're done. And so that kind of keeps it from jumping. So this will keep it from jittering. Next up, we need to fix the issue with the player dying instantly. So we want to give the player invulnerability. So, because I mean the two options we have here, I guess maybe three. We could either push the asteroids out of the way so that when we die, anything that's like within a certain circle gets pushed out of the way. Or we could wait for it to be safe. I don't like the waiting for it to be safe because it potentially could, you might have to wait a couple seconds and you just sit there waiting for yourself to spawn. Or we can just make the player invulnerable. So when you die, you have like 3 seconds of, you have 3 seconds to get out of the way of asteroids or destroy the asteroid. So that's, I think the invulnerability is kind of neat because it's a really, it's shows how you could even start doing power-ups too, which I think is pretty cool. So for that, that's going to be something involving the player. And actually, let's make some more instance variables for it. My incredibly long list of instance variables for the player. So right underneath energy cooldown, we're going to add invul timer. So invulnerability timer. I can't trust myself to spell invulnerability, so it's called invul timer. And we set this to a number of frames that we want. So I'm doing 180 because that's 3 seconds. It's kind of long-ish, but it's fine. Then we're gonna add another one called invul timer max. And we'll set that to 180. Maybe we can add a power-up that increases or decreases your invulnerability timer. So during create, so we're gonna jump over to create. We want to also make sure that the current invul timer gets set to the max. So in case we tweak the max, that it will adjust. So invul timer equals invul timer max. So like I said, in case we shorten the max time or increase the max time, it will adjust both variables accordingly. So let's handle this invulnerability inside of end step, because that's typically where we handle most of our cooldowns. And we'll do it right after we regenerate our energy. So invulnerability, I think that's how you spell it. Invulnerability cooldown and color, because we're gonna also tweak the color with this. So if invul timer is greater than 0, that's how we would know if we're invulnerable. So if it's greater than 0, image underscore alpha equals 0.4, image underscore blend equals C aqua. This is up to you if you want to do this. What this will do is this will fade the player to be 40% opaque. I don't know how to spell opaque. 40% solid. And tint teal-ish. So if you don't like this effect, just don't do it. But this gives the player some visual confirmation that there's a different state going on right now. Invul timer --, so every frame we take away 1 from the invul timer. Now I will say that this is a little perhaps inefficient to reset this every time. So we could have wrapped this in an if statement that if the image alpha is 1, then set this. But I don't think it's going to cost us enough performance to really sweat that. So if invul timer is ever less than or equal to 0, then that means that it ticked down and finished. So we'll reset my alpha back to 1.0, which will mean I'm 100% solid. And we'll go back to having no tint, which is sea white. And so if we hit play, we can see that we get this coloration. We're really super faded out, and then eventually it wears off, but it doesn't actually protect us. So to actually have the invulnerability protect us, we have to we'd have to add some logic inside of the collision event here. And really it's not going to be very difficult for us to do this. Essentially, we only want to collide, only trigger a death if not invulnerable. So if invul timer is less than or equal to 0, I do less than or equal to 0 just in case it ever gets set to negative, and put all this stuff inside of an if statement on that. So we only get destroyed if that timer happens to be 0, and it does count down. So after 3 seconds, we will be vulnerable. Oops. So we can see but now that I'm normal color, I can get destroyed. But while I'm a ghost, I pass through asteroids. Just make sure you don't end your invulnerability inside of an asteroid. So that gives us invulnerability so that whenever we get destroyed, we have a little bit of time to get out of the way of other asteroids. Also, we've got our game over text, so that's going to be pretty cool. So when we're defeated, we see game over. And really the last few things we would have for this would be to handle advancing to the next level and adding some kind of level system where it keeps on going, so that you can try to get a high score. So there, I'm gonna put in some power-up icons after this. So if you want to stick around for that, I would encourage you to keep watching. If you're in a hurry, you can jump to the next video where we continue on with the project. So after this, yeah, we're just gonna put in a really kind of cool looking special effect bar. So this bar, we're going to go into the UI and import it. So we need to create a new sprite. And this is going to be SPR underscore UI underscore invuln underscore state. And I'm just calling it that because it's like the invulnerability state. So I go to import, and there's this icon here called invuln icon. And we want to load that up. And so there's our icon. Tentatively, I'm going to leave it top left. I don't think I need to tweak anything on here. And then we're going to do one more. We're going to be kind of creative with this. So I'm going to load 2 sprites into one frame so that I can take use of just how I use the different index when we call the draw function. So we'll call this SPR underscore UI underscore state bar. And we're going to import these 2 files, green bar fill and green bar line. So I'm going to hit open. Loads these up. So we've got and I'm reordering. I just clicked and dragged to reorder this. So I've got, for the 0th frame, the outline of the bar, and for the 1st frame, I've got the green fill for it. Now, upon thinking about this shade of black may be really hard to see, so you may want to consider painting it so that you end up getting an easier to see bar. So I just made it white. Maybe it would be kind of interesting if you made it teal, but that might just clash with the green. So I'm just going with white. And then here, I do want to set this to middle left so that the kind of the point of origin for drawing this thing is right there. We don't need to worry about the FPS because we're not going to draw this, and definitely not going to be drawing this. So we're drawing it individual frames. We're not going to deal with it as an animation. I just wanted to set it up like this because I thought it was interesting to see. So we're going to actually have the player handle drawing its own invulnerability bar. And this is kind of neat. So when we add a draw event to the player, what's normally going to happen, so let's say draw power up states. So what's normally going to happen, just by adding this event, we no longer draw the player. There is no player. You can see my little particles indicating where the player is, and I still collide. I still have a hitbox, but I don't draw anymore. And that's mildly annoying, but you can tell it to still draw the normal sprite. So we can still draw the normal sprite with the command draw_self, and that's a method, so we have the parentheses on it. Now let's draw a power up bar, icon and bar for invulnerability. So if invul timer is greater than 0, then we want to go through all this stuff. We need to calculate the ratio. So that would be var invul ratio equals invul timer divided by invul timer max. So that calculates the percentage or the ratio of how much of this state we still have. Var full bar width, just to save me some typing here, is sprite underscore get width SPR underscore, oh, what do I call that thing? UI state bar. That's the problem with picking these really insane variable names is you don't always remember them. So now we're going to calculate the width of the bar. And actually, well, yeah. So we'll do var. And now I'm going to calculate, well, yeah, we'll calculate, so var bar width is what we'll call this. And that will be the full bar width times the invuln ratio. So if we have 50% of my invulnerability left, the invuln ratio will be 0.5, and if the width of the bar is 100 pixels, then 100 pixels times 0.5 will be 50 pixels. So it tells us how much width, and we did this for the energy bar, and so we're going to see this in another context. Now, I'm going to do this slightly differently than I did the energy bar. Instead, I'm going to draw a cropped component of the bar. And the reason I'm drawing it cropped is because if we look at the sprites, there's actually like shading on the edges of the bar, and it would look really weird if I stretched that. The other bar was fine with it because the way that I constructed that sprite was, if you notice, there's no variation on the horizontalness of this bar. This bar literally could have been 1 pixel width, and we could have just stretched it because there's no difference in the horizontalness of this bar. But in the other one, there's some shading on the edges. And so I don't want to stretch this. I just want to crop this. So I'm only going to draw so far of the bar. I'm going to basically crop it as I render it. That lets you kind of give more texture to a bar so it doesn't get stretched. So it's a different way of handling drawing hit point bars, any type of bar that you might want. And actually, this would be a really good way for you to do asteroid hit point bars too. You could take this same exact idea, and whenever an asteroid gets hit for maybe 2 seconds, it shows the hit points above it. And literally this same exact strategy. So let's draw the cropped power up bar. So draw underscore sprite underscore parts. This is the code that allows us to crop it. And so we're drawing SPR underscore UI bar state. We're drawing frame 1, which is the green part. And then we're doing the top or the left edge of it, which is 0, the top, which is 0, so we're not changing that. Then we're doing bar width for how wide it's going to be. And then we're going to actually get the height and say sprite get height of sprite UI state bar. Then we decide where we draw it. So we're still on this. So we're going to put a comma. We want, basically, it'll be centered above the player. And we want it 62 pixels above the player. Now that took a little bit of computation to figure out how I wanted it to, like, why I wanted it there. So then let's draw the regular bar. Draw the outline of the bar. This doesn't change. So that's just a regular draw sprite. And that's going to be SPR UI state bar frame 0 at X, comma, Y minus 40. And that has to do with the fact that it's a different size. So because we're grabbing this height, it's getting the height of only the green part, not the rest of the bar. And then we'll draw the icon that indicates that this is invulnerability. And that is draw underscore sprite SPR UI invul state 0th frame at X minus 34 and Y minus 56. This just took a bunch of experimentation till it looked good. Now I did forget to resize the bar, so this won't actually look correct, and we'll fix that in a second. Oops, actually we'll crash because I didn't spell invul right. I was just off by 1 letter, 1 position. So yeah, you can kind of see that that didn't line up right. But it does kind of indicate that I have a special power or something on my player. So yeah, let's resize this. So if we jump over to UI state bar and then click the 4 arrows here for resize sprite, I just want to double it. And so that means it's going to be 44 by 44. Hit apply. Doesn't really change that, but it will line up because my calculations were done with this doubled. And we can see the bar working there. And so that lasts for 3 seconds. You can pull out your phone and time it. And now we know that we're invulnerable for 3 seconds. And that's about it. So next up, we need to implement beating the level and loading in the next level. And that will wrap up Asteroids. So join me as we begin the conclusion of our project. So I'm excited to see you guys in that video. Oh, got blown up, but I'm invulnerable now, haha. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.